You're listening to Aviation Marketing Hangar Flying, the community for the best sales and marketing professionals in the aviation industry. You can't learn to fly just from a book. You learn from other pilots who know the tools, the skills, and the territory. Your hosts, John and Paula Williams, are your sales and marketing test pilots. They take the risks for you and share strategies, relevant examples, hacks, and how-tos. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes so you won't miss a thing.
Welcome to Aviation Marketing Hangar Flying, episode number 27, Your Dress Code as Marketing. So this is the episode that your employees hoped you would never hear. Right? Is a dress code and appearance code still relevant, and do you actually have the right to tell people what to wear? We'll be talking about all this and more today. I'm Paula Williams.
I'm John Williams.
And we are ABCI, and ABCI's mission is
to help all you folks out there sell more stuff.
Exactly. So the way that this came about is that we are working with a client, and as you know, members of our masterclass get office hours, and in their office hours, sometimes what people request us to do is what we call mystery shopping. They say, we'd like you to pose as a customer, come to our place of business, either virtually or in person, and see what you think of our sales process, see what's going wrong. Often this is to diagnose a problem. And in this case, we had a situation with a company that had really, really great sales processes. They had lots of leads coming in. They had a very enthusiastic sales force. Life was really good. And they were wondering why sales weren't happening the way they were supposed to be. So in the process of doing some mystery shopping, one of the things that happened, and this is a company that did a lot of sales over the web, and video conferencing was part of that sales process. Now, when we got on a video conference with our client's salesperson, one of the things that happens is something that happens fairly frequently on GoToMeeting. People get real casual about GoToMeeting, and they don't really think about how they're being seen and how they're being perceived. And so this person had us on an iPad, and he was carrying his iPad around the house, and it was just making us dizzy. Do you remember this, Sean?
Yes.
And the way he was holding it was just, like under his chin. So we're looking up at his face, literally looking up the guy's nose, which is just kind of disturbing. And it's really hard, no matter how professional his speech is, no matter how well he is hitting all the right points in the sales process, no matter what he's saying, there's a lot that goes into that. And he was also wearing a t-shirt, and he had not shaved that day. And there's just some things you gotta do. And it seems like some of that's fallen by the wayside because we think that we're protected by technology. We think that we are evolved past the need for a dress code and all those other things, right?
And what's actually true is we're exposed by technology.
Yes, that is absolutely true. So let's talk about an idea called cognitive dissonance in the sales process. Now, I know this is a really nerdy concept, and so we're going to illustrate this with a really great Dilbert cartoon that appeared in the not too distant past. So Dilbert's boss in the first frame, for those of you who are listening rather than reading, Dilbert's boss is reading a report to Dilbert, and he says, "If your numbers are correct, my strategic plan is irrational." And then there's one of those thought bubbles that says, "Cognitive dissonance takes over." Spoink! And the boss says, "You sure are bad with numbers." And Dilbert says, "What was that noise?" So whenever you have a situation where you have two conflicting sets of data, one of which is your assumption that this person knows what they're talking about and they're a competent professional salesperson, but you have another piece of information coming in, and that is that you happen to be looking up the guy's nose and he hasn't shaved and he's wearing a t-shirt. Those two pieces of conflicting data will usually give way to the lowest common denominator, right?
Unfortunate, but true.
Exactly. So you put all this work and all this effort into your sales process, and yet it's being torpedoed by the fact that something as simple as appearances is torpedoing your entire effort. So another way of looking at that is mixed messages. And, if you've got two street signs, one that says do not enter and the other that says enter only.
On the same pole.
Exactly. You have no idea what you're supposed to do. And so, whenever you're confused customers don't buy, right?
No, they don't.
Absolutely. So we need to make sure that we're sending a very clear message and that all of our advertising, all of our marketing, all of the hard work that we're doing in the sales process and everything else is supported rather than undermined by things like the dress code. So another thing that's really interesting about the aviation industry is that aviation people are very visual. I mean, to succeed in the aviation industry, they've had to learn how to process a lot of visual data very, very quickly, often without even thinking about what they're looking at consciously. It just becomes a natural part of the way people's brains work. And if you're looking at a six-pack display, if you are scanning the horizon, there's a lot of visual tasks that they become really, really good at, right, John?
Yep. You either got to, like one of my instructors told me, you either got to speed up your cross-check or slow down your hands.
Right. So they process a lot of visual information very, very quickly, and that includes the way someone looks, the way someone acts, their mannerisms, what they're wearing, and all of those things. Another weird thing about aviation, or different anyway, unique thing about aviation, is that we have a higher than average number of former military people. And military people tend to care what people wear, right, John?
Yes, they do. It doesn't matter whether you're enlisted, if you stayed in long enough to move up the ranks, or if you're an officer. The way you dress is eminently important when you have a meeting.
Absolutely. And, if John spent some time at Fort Hood where he had to wear a uniform all the time, and they had a lot of people in the town around Fort Hood that were experts at assembling uniforms, and that's what they did. They sewed the patches on in the right places, and these people would measure within an eighth or a 16th of an inch, just to make sure that everything is exactly perfectly lined up. Just because the visuals...
It's closer than that. It was exact.
It was exact. Everything is so visually important to military folks, and it becomes part of the discipline, part of the code of things that are communicated by a person's uniform. So there's a lot that goes into that, and a lot of these people are coming from that kind of background, and then they're getting into a meeting with your 20-something-year-old sales guy who maybe doesn't have the same background and doesn't understand the importance of this. So, we're not saying that people are sloppy. We're not saying that people are horrible. We're just saying that there's a level of awareness that needs to be raised here.
You should dress for your audience.
Exactly.
And that means you have to know their demographics,
Mm-hmm.
where they've come from, the way they dress in their own offices, and the clientele they have.
Absolutely. That's correct. And that means, if you're going to a casual event, you should dress casually, but in a very neat, casual way that emphasizes the most positive characteristics of your company. So, if you're very detail-oriented, if you tell people that you're concerned about quality, if you are expected to be taking care of people's airplanes, other kinds of things, they're expecting a level of attention to detail that has to be communicated in every way you can get that message across.
Some would argue with me, but I'm going to say that the way you dress is indicative of the way you run the company.
Right. And another example of this, one of our kids was in Taekwondo for a long time, which is a Korean martial art, and he actually taught Taekwondo to little kids. And he had to teach these little kids and their parents most of the time how to dress, in fact, how to wear a uniform, and the fact that you have to wear a uniform, and it has to be clean, and it has to be ironed, and it has to be worn properly. And if you don't do all of those things, you won't be allowed in class. And he was sending kids home for not wearing a uniform. Now, did this Taekwondo studio lose business to the people down the street that maybe weren't so strict? Potentially. But it also was the most expensive and the most competitive, most effective competitively, most what is the word? They won the most tournaments.
Most desirable.
Exactly. They won the most tournaments. And part of that was the discipline of making people show up in uniform. There is something about showing up in uniform, and Mickey explained this to the kids and explained this to their parents, that, if you're showing up in a clean, pressed, perfect uniform, you are ready to go. You have prepared for the class. You've made it part of your routine. You have the discipline to make things happen. And you care enough to convey that. And, you're not just phoning in a performance or, just kind of thinking maybe you'll play Taekwondo today. You're actually part of the team, and you're part of the unit because you're communicating those ideas.
Discipline starts with small things so that people know that you have the discipline for the larger things.
Exactly. Now, there's a lot of things that are working against us these days. In fashion magazines, there's a picture of a young lady who is, and this is actually how to dress for work in a fashion magazine. And it shows a young lady in cutoff Levi shorts with pockets hanging out the bottom. She's wearing kind of a blazer and an untucked t-shirt, and just looks like she's dressed for a Saturday
in the park.
It does not look like she's dressed for work. But there has been a lot of, I'm going to call it downward pressure on dressing up for work. And a lot of that has to do with the technology industry. The Steve Jobs wearing a t-shirt rather than a suit made that really famous. And, a lot of that is, I'm going to say, probably good, because, we don't have to necessarily do dry cleaning every day, and, not every situation is appropriate for a tie. But I think the pendulum swung way too far the other direction, and we've got people who are showing up for work in things that are really not appropriate and that really do a lot more harm than good. We've got
If you're losing sales because of the way you dress or your employees dress, that tells the story right there. It doesn't matter what you really think or what they think.
Exactly. And this is not easy, okay? We know there's movies and, all kinds of things going on in the world that kind of portray the half-shaven or unshaven look as being glamorous. The last Hunger Games movie had this young lady with half of her hair shaved off, and, it was really, I guess, hip and chic and all those kinds of things. But we're really not here to make a fashion statement. We're really here to do what's effective. And we actually had a young lady that worked for us that does mail for us, and I like her a whole lot. She's a very young person, come to work with half her head shaved and purple hair one day and a nose ring. And, I was at a loss, because I wasn't completely unprepared for this. I wasn't expecting to have this conversation with somebody that had up to that point been, really professional, and she did fantastic work, and I really like this person a lot, and I really was not sure how to handle the situation because we didn't have a dress code. We never thought we needed one because most of our folks are part-time or contract folks, and they don't really come face to face with our customers. But that was the point at which we decided that we really do need to have a dress code, and it's only fair to us and to the people that work with us to say, here's the circumstances under which we're going to have a say in the way that you dress and what you wear. And those are, if you have interactions with clients, if you go to trade shows representing ABCI, several other things, then here are some basic guidelines for what is and is not okay.
Yeah, if you're going to go sell marijuana in Colorado, then whatever the demographic is, then dress for that.
Yep.
But if you're going to be selling airplanes or stuff for airplanes, people in aviation typically don't dress like that. Right.
Our target demographic is generally a little more conservative than some of the examples that you're seeing here. The torn jeans, the unshaven, the Crocs, those plastic shoes. It just is not the right message that we want to send to these kinds of folks. So let's talk about the message that we do want to send. Of course, if you're in an FBO or you're running an FBO, there are some specific things that you have to do if someone's on the ramp. There's some safety protocols, the closed-toe shoes. Sometimes there's the metal tipped shoes. Steel-toed shoes that are required. So there's some safety protocols that you have to work into your dress code. But, for the folks in the office and other kinds of things, you want to make it comfortable and you want to make it workable so that they can get around, get their jobs done, maybe not have an enormous dry cleaning bill, but are able to get their jobs done and look smart and look like part of a team and, make it obvious who your employees are. So that's if you're running an FBO. If you're running a maintenance shop, there's been a trend in recent times toward these novelty T-shirts. We've got one on our slide here that says aircraft maintenance, caution, flying tools and obscene language is more than likely. And if you're working on your own plane or you have other things going on, then, those are funny and those are great. And, we think they're cool. But, in most cases, people who take care of other folks' airplanes, we want to see them in some kind of a uniform. We want to see them looking clean, looking like they have attention to detail and like they take pride in their job. Shorts are probably fine, especially if you're in a really hot climate and things like that. But, ironed shirts with the name tags, those are really, I think, smart and make a lot of sense. In most cases, they have uniforms provided so that you take care of the laundry and you make sure everybody's got clean uniforms all the time. So when you take your airplane into the shop somewhere, you're looking for something pretty specific, or there's some things that make you feel more comfortable about that, and there's probably some things that make you feel uncomfortable, right, John?
Yes. I taxi into a hangar or move it into a hangar with the guys, then I want to see that hangar sparkling clean and the people that are going to work on my airplane looking sharp and clean, knowledgeable.
Mm-hmm. Clean cut, is that important?
Yes.
Okay. And that's a different expectation than you have when you take your Harley in to the Harley shop, right?
No.
No? Well, those guys have tattoos and they sometimes have beards.
But there's a difference. I mean, tattoos are one thing. I don't even worry about that. But but they are clean cut. The shop is spotless.
Yes. That is true. So some of these things may be a difference of opinion and a difference of demographics. So you can make your own decision about tattoos and piercings and other kinds of things. But, I think uniforms and cleanliness are pretty universal. What do you think?
Yep.
All right. Okay. And then professional services. If you are selling insurance, legal services, tax services, consulting of any kind, marketing like we do, other kinds of things like that. If you're a broker, then business attire is still, or at least business casual attire, depending on the situation and the setting, is still pretty much the word of the day for aviation folks. In fact, every aviation conference I've ever been to has been formal business dress, as far as the coat and tie, the plain shirt, the business shoes, the whole 9 yards. So I think almost more than any other industry, and we've worked in finance, we have worked in education, we've worked in some pretty traditional industries, and I think aviation is probably one of the more conservative, wouldn't you say?
Yes, IT used to be,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's less than it used to be now.
Yeah, I think Steve Jobs kind of threw a wrench in that one. But
even toward the end, he was
yeah.
dressing up in turtlenecks and looking sharp.
Yeah, that's true. He was kind of conceding to some of his objectives. He wanted to achieve his objectives almost more than he wanted to convey his style, and his rebellious streak mellowed a little bit. But there's two things. One, aviation is international. And so if you're doing business with European people, Asian people, and other kinds of folks, their dress standards are often stricter than ours. So if you are in a situation like at a conference where there may be international people there, you want to make sure that you're dressing in a way that they're not going to be negatively affected by what you're wearing. And then the other thing, of course, is the trust factor. You have a higher than average number of decision makers who are 35 and older, male, like we said, a lot of them have the military experience and things like that. So all of that really adds up to a more traditional style. And so there is nothing wrong with that. And this really isn't about what you like personally. This is about what happens to be effective. So you can think of this as a uniform, really.
Sure. I worked for IBM for a few years, and I worked in IT, and in IBM you wore a suit, coat, tie.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the way it was. You get used to it, and you felt uncomfortable when you weren't in it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so a lot of flight attendants these days have had some downward pressure on their dress codes as well. So, a lot of them have been wearing the sweaters rather than the jackets. A lot of them have been wearing pants rather than skirts, and all of that is fine. But you'll notice there's a different trend among some, I'm going to say probably like the UAE, the Emirates.
Yes.
Flight attendants are very dressed up. Virgin Airlines flight attendants are very dressed up. In fact, there was a recent article that I saw about Richard Branson and his insistence on the patent leather heels. And this particular shoe, if you're seeing our show notes, this is the Virgin Airlines red patent heel, which is available through Zappos for $375, I think. So it is expensive. They're willing to spend the money on nice shoes. And, there's lots of reasons for a flight attendant to be wearing flat shoes. But
There are just as many, if not more, reasons for them to be wearing heels.
Exactly. If you're thinking from a marketing perspective, if you're trying to differentiate yourself, if you're trying to associate yourself with kind of that old school glamour or that old school service, then there is nothing like a heel to really convey that. And I think they're taking the chance on the fact that there are going to be some flight attendants that won't work for Virgin because they don't want to wear the shoes, and that does disqualify some people who maybe have a different attitude towards service than what they're looking for. All right, so. Also, I think Qatar Aviation is a great example. They do a really nice job of always showing up for trade shows and other things looking like the Qatar team. They always look like a team. Whatever they've decided to wear, they all do it to the hilt. And, at some shows they do of course, they're based in the Southwest, so they will sometimes do the cowboy hats, the cowboy boots, the jeans, and all of that. And so anywhere that they go during a conference, you can tell that's a Qatar Aviation guy, or there goes the Qatar Aviation team, or there, if you're sitting in an event where there's a lot of folks sitting around in a general assembly or something like that, you can see where the Qatar guys are. They are really, really obvious and really professional at the same time. I think they do a nice job of combining those two things. So Glenn Shepard he has the blog Work Is Not for Sissies, and he has a pretty good poster and a pretty good dress code, I think. He explains it really well. He says, if you'd wear it to the state fair, don't wear it to work. And he actually sells posters that look like that. Glenn's first rule of dressing for success. So what you really need to do with a dress code is you need to decide before you have a problem, so you don't get caught unawares like I was, and you just assume that everybody knows what business casual means. You want to make sure that you've clearly defined expectations, and everybody knows what that means. You want to explain early and often, and you want to explain why. So, this is not because we want to control what you do after work. This is not because we think you're a terrible person or any of those things. This is because this is the way we want to communicate to our customers, and these are the core values that we need to communicate, and this is the best way to make sure that we are not sabotaging our message in the process. So if you have some illustrated dress codes, and I've put some examples of this, and there will be some links in the show notes to one resource from the Business Insider that shows executive casual, business casual, and some other types of dress codes that you could either just adopt and say this is going to be our dress code, or you could take parts of those and say this is fine, but tattoos are also fine. Whatever your situation is, you want to make sure that you define that before you have a problem and introduce that in a way that applies to everyone, and you're going to have to comply to it yourself if you are the boss, because you can't expect your folks to do what you're not willing to do yourself, right?
Well, you are the boss.
Well, you are the boss. Exactly. No, but if I'm meeting with employees and I'm not meeting with clients, I will still adhere to our dress code because I have respect for the people that work with us. So I'm gonna do for them what I expect them to do for me and what I expect them to do for our clients. So, that's a two-way street. Here's another one. This one is from Washington State University. They have a pretty good illustrated dress code of, here are some examples of what is and isn't acceptable in different environments and things like that. So a lot of us are using webcams. So let's take a minute and talk about how to look good on a webcam. John, you're our technology guy. So we have a guy on the left and a guy on the right.
Well, disregarding that, the first thing you do is dress like you go into a business meeting face to face.
Exactly.
I mean, it doesn't matter if you got a home office or just a private office. If you're going to be in a meeting of any kind where somebody can see you, you should be dressing as if you were going to go and talk to them person to person in a meeting.
Exactly. Everything that they can see should be a professional environment. So in our show notes, we have a visual here of a guy on the left in a t-shirt where the light from his computer is reflecting off his glasses.
And the light is behind him instead of in front of him.
Yeah, some lighting behind him. He's got a bunch of shelves and it's very cluttered. And then on the right, he's got a backdrop behind him. He's sitting in an office chair. He's wearing a button-down shirt. It just looks 1,000 times more professional. He's got lighting from the front.
And you'd be surprised how many people don't understand. They do it time after time with the light behind them. Mm-hmm. And you finally say something, oh, is that what's causing that?
Exactly.
They just don't know. It just doesn't work into their conscious effect of what's going on.
Exactly. So if you do appear on a webcam on a regular basis, then you want to look around your office or look around your conference room, or look for a place where you can have a nice backdrop, where you can have the light in front of you, or in front of you and behind the camera. And we can put some diagrams on the website to kind of illustrate how this is done. But you also want to make sure that you take care of your grooming. People can see if you shaved or not. People can see if you've done your hair or not. You want to look at what's going to be showing up behind you. And, if you're going to be walking around your office, if you want to turn your webcam to show somebody something or things like that, you want to think about that ahead of time so that you're not showing them, a really messy office or a bunch of boxes or, something that looks unprofessional. Because if you are conveying the idea that you are a professional, detail-oriented person, and yet you're not paying attention, that doesn't help your message at all.
You really shouldn't move the camera unless you've got one that has electronic panning on it.
Exactly. All right, so let's talk about social media and other types of photos. And we've got several examples, and you can use different pictures for different things. So, you've got casual pictures, you've got snapshots, you've got professional pictures. And so we kind of want to talk about where and when you want to use each of those things. So informal pictures, snapshots, showing you in action, showing you near your airplane, showing you, in my case, I use speaking photos for some of our social media photos because I want to get more speaking gigs. So you want to show yourself doing what it is that you do for a living, because that improves your credibility and so on. But as a profile picture, you often want to have that be a more professional photo with good lighting. And, you can really tell the difference between a professional photo and selfie or a really informal photo, and there's a place for both.
Unless you get lucky. I got a picture of her when we were in Paris in the April one year, and it came out perfect.
Right. And I've used that on some of the books that we've written and other things, because it is a good picture, and it does convey a certain feeling that we sometimes want to show, and if we want to have a more informal setting for a more business casual kind of a feel, then we use that one. If we want to do something more buttoned up, we've got some formal photos for press releases and other kinds of things. We've also got some pictures of, John in the cowboy hat and so on, and us in Utah to kind of show this is where we live. We've got pictures with Charlie and Whiskey with our 172s. So, those are kind of give people a better indication, make them feel more like part of the family and part of what we do. So there's good times and places for all kinds of photos, but for your profile photo for LinkedIn, I think it's really important to have a professional photo. Don't you think so, John?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you want people to be able to see you really well so that they would be able to recognize you when they saw you again at a conference and things.
Which is the most likely place you're going to meet them.
Which is the most likely place you're going to meet them.
Or in a sales call. In either case, you're going to be dressed up. So
exactly. So you want to be really recognizable at first glance, and you want that to be a reassuring photo, conveying the fact that you are a professional person and you will take very good care of them and their airplane and their needs and everything else. So that's what you're communicating with your appearance. All right, so we do have a free tip sheet, a LinkedIn tip sheet that includes some tips and pointers on your profile photo and how you want to use that to your advantage and things like that. So do make sure that you download that. If you would like some more assistance with personal branding, mystery shopping, any of those other kinds of things, feel free to give us a call, at 702-987-1679. Or, you can check us out on our website, our Aviation Marketing Masterclass. That does come up pretty often as mystery shopping, as solving sales problems, as how do I solve this dress code problem, and other kinds of things. We've got very smart people in the class who have run into these kinds of things before, so you're not alone, and you don't have to face the uncomfortable task of talking to your employees about your dress code by yourself. There's lots of resources out there that will help you do that in a way that's not going to be confrontational or horrible. So go out there and sell more stuff. America needs the business, right?
Yeah, Zig Ziglar.
This is Zig Ziglar saying that it is still very much applicable, right?
Every day.
Every day. Subscribe to our podcast, and please do leave a review. See you next week.
See you next time.
Thanks for joining us for Aviation Marketing Hangar Flying, the best place to learn what really works in sales and marketing in the aviation industry. Remember to subscribe on iTunes and leave a rating.
You could be larger than life.